Hello, SYNGAP Land. I'm continuing from episode 189. This is now episode 190 of the Cure SYNGAP 1 podcast. It's still Thursday, November 27th, Thanksgiving Day, week 48 of the year. I was talking about papers and how PubMed is at 52. And then the one paper people can't get enough of is this AAV paper in mice. Links in the show notes. I talked about it back in episode 187. This is a really exciting paper. And we've got... There was an article written in IPM that I shared in 187. There was also an article written in Transmitter, which is a newsletter from Simon's Foundation about public interesting science for their diseases, of which we are one, thank goodness. So we have reprinted the Transmitter article on our blog, so that's in our blog. And we had the great honor of having the two first authors from that paper who did all the work do a webinar for us. So you're like, oh, there's a blog, there's a webinar, I've got to do that. Where do I find that? Guys, it couldn't be simpler. curesingap1.org/ you guessed it, blog. And let's just talk about the blog for a second, because there is a lot of good stuff in that blog, all right? If you go onto that blog today, we've got Issac's story, which is an amazing story that, again, we reprinted from a hospital that wrote about Issac. We have that Transmitter reprint on the AAV that was done on mice. We have a write-up on Scramble 4. So Julie Miles down in South Carolina does this amazing golf event every year. And is it South or is it North? I can never get these straight. I don't understand. But anyway, she's in something Carolina. And Scramble 4 was a write-up. It was amazing. And then Jackie Cancier, our head of advocacy, wrote about autism, and we reprinted that and basically said, you know, there's all these people being like, autism is my child's superpower. She's like, not my child. It's kicking my kid's butt. So whether you agree with her or not, that's a must read. You got to read it. I mean, those of you who are parents of 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, like, just stop and listen to the 18-year-olds. Because I'm telling you, this second decade is rough, and I'm only 1 year into it. And you gotta look around corners. So it's great that we have somebody as brilliant as Jackie Cancier to share her perspective there. And it's good to be inspired by Julie and the leadership there. 4 years on, her whole community knows who Miller is. Her whole community knows what SYNGAP is. She's really done herself and Cure SYNGAP 1 a service because she raises money every year. And then our webinars page is curesingap1.org/resources/webinars. I don't know why we have resources in there. I'm going to talk to someone about that. But that's a super helpful page because that's all our webinars, and there's a lot of them. But I'm just going to talk about webinars 119 to 112. So the first two webinars on that page are 118 and 119, oddly out of order. And there you can register for live stream. So if you can't join us for the conference, just sign up. It's like going to be a big old Zoom meeting. And you can just listen in to all the content for both days. It's well worth your time. If you're a SYNGAP parent and you can come, you should come. But if you can't make it, or if you're a scientist or a postdoc or a grad student or an undergrad or a sibling or whatever you are, if you're curious about the conference, it's there, it's free, it's available to you. Thank you to our sponsors for making that possible. Then there's a webinar about the Allen Institute, where, as I just mentioned, the first authors walk us through their work and their paper. It's really exciting. There's two webinars in Espanol for our Spanish-speaking community. There's a webinar about our work in SMART, which is our Missense program. If your child has a Missense mutation, go watch those webinars. There's a webinar on Unlock, how to do a fundraiser, why to do a fundraiser, how the web pages work, blah, blah, blah. If you're like, I want to do a fundraiser, Giving Tuesday in 5 days, how do I do that? curesingap1.org/unlock, and then go to that webinar for more helpful tips. And last but not least, there's a webinar on RareX, which is the platform we used for PROs, also known as patient-reported outcomes, for our natural history study PROMMiS. There's a lot going on, guys, a lot of moving parts, but we need you to self-educate and jump into those things. The other very cool resource on our website, and I'm not entirely sure if I've mentioned this before. I keep running out of time on these podcasts. Now I'm just going to keep making more podcasts. It's fine. But curesingap1.org/podcasts will take you to our 3 podcasts. This one, Cure SYNGAP 1 podcast, SYNGAP Stories, which is an interview series, and Cafe SYNGAP Uno. In SYNGAP Stories, the most recent interview is number 38 with Virginie. Virginie is our president and COO, right? So I still do this podcast. I still talk to industry. I still run around rare disease space and do rare disease stuff. But I'm 50 now, guys. Like, it's just, I can't keep up with our organization and running all the internal stuff while also doing the external stuff. I just can't. And so Virginie McNamara, for her sins or out of some abundance of grace, it's hard to tell, agreed to be our president and COO, and she's exceptional. So if you don't know Virginie, make sure you listen to episode 38 and understand who it is that's really leading and managing the organization, while Mike's just out here basically doing biz dev and communications for SYNGAP. And I don't want to give Virginie short shrift. She is very close to me and helping me with all that stuff too, as is Catherine and Lauren. But as SYNGAP becomes more important and Cure SYNGAP 1 becomes a bigger organization, leadership doesn't equal Mike anymore, right? Leadership equals the whole staff, myself, Catherine, Virginie, Lauren, and then of course the board, Suzanne Jones and other board members and many others. So if you don't know Virginie and you don't understand her story and haven't heard her speak, please listen to that podcast and then tell her she speaks well. Send her a note, say, hey, you should talk more, because I would really like to see her get out there and be more visible and vocal. I want to talk about clinical trials in genetic medicine for a second. We have, as I mentioned at the top of the last episode 189, there's 2 clinical trials right now recruiting for SYNGAP. Those are small molecules. And next year we expect globally, Australia, Europe, UK, US, hopefully, CAMP4 to start recruiting for a genetic therapy, an ASO, for SYNGAP 1, right? So today, if you're not happy with the drugs you've got and the options, consider those 2 clinical trials and know that next year there's an ASO coming. But now that we're in this space of genetic medicine and it's coming so fast because of the hard work of Cure SYNGAP 1 and many others, by the way, it's important to start paying attention to other big diseases and understand how these things go. So a really exciting and interesting example is that Ultragenyx, which is a drug company that runs the boot camp that I went to and focuses on rare diseases, working with FAST. FAST is the Cure SYNGAP 1 of Angelman, right? But I almost feel silly saying that. Like, we are the FAST of SYNGAP is what's really, because FAST is much bigger and more established than we are. But Ultragenyx and FAST do work together on a drug for Angelman. And they just announced a follow-on trial for their drug, right? So the first ASO trial they had, very much like the first ASO trial we're going to have, was really focused on a certain age and a certain phenotype and a certain genotype, meaning certain kind of mutations, certain kind of presentation, pretty narrow age cohort. Why? Because they want the cleanest group of patients going in, so they get the clearest signal, so they can say to regulators, this works, let us give it to patients. But once that's done, you start doing follow-on trials with more genotypes, more phenotypes. Genotypes are kinds of mutations. Phenotypes are kinds of presentations, right? So in SYNGAP, you would imagine, I don't know anything, I'm just imagining, if I were designing a clinical trial for SYNGAP, that first trial, I'm going to have only protein truncating variants, some kind of clear seizure activity, either visible or on EEG, and probably some motor issues, right? That just back of the envelope. That's what I would expect them to do for the first trial. But if that goes well, if they fill it, if they get good data, if the regulators are receptive, then I would hope that they would expand it maybe in terms of age, maybe in terms of genotype, let the missense in, maybe in terms of phenotype, let kids who don't present quite the same in and see what changes there. That's what we hope for. That's what we look forward to. And that's exactly what just happened in the Angelman community. So if you don't get into the first phase 1-2 for the first ASO next year, don't lose hope, because there's going to be a lot of follow-on trials. That's my point. The other thing I want to point out is that I think it was 2 days ago, 1 day ago, I can't keep track anymore. Novartis, massive drug company, just got approval for the first gene therapy for spinal muscular atrophy. Spinal muscular atrophy got the first ASO for spinal muscular atrophy was back in December 2019. I love doing date math. That was 6 years ago. It took them 6 years to get from the first ASO to the first AAV, the first gene therapy. That's an interesting number. What will that number be for us? Will it be 6 years? Will it be 10 years? Will it be 1 year? Will it be 6 months? Who knows? Who knows? But always good to pay attention to how things evolve. And if you don't know, spinal muscular atrophy is important because, the spine is part of the CNS. It's not the brain, but it's part of the CNS. So once they got success with this ASO Spinraza for spinal muscular atrophy, people got more courage about coming after the brain with ASOs. And that's when the team part of the team who did Spinraza left, started a company called Stoke Therapeutics and went after Dravet. And of course, now they're hopefully working on SYNGAP. So just important to follow this stuff and to make sure you understand how this space works. Thanks so much for listening. Please come to the conference. The conference is in 5 days. It's going to be amazing.